All right, let's do this. Time for our deep dive into, you guessed it, the Brat Pack.
Oh, yeah. I'm excited for this one.
I think a lot of people listening, I mean, they already know the basics, but
Yeah.
they're here for the juicy details.
hmm
The stuff you don't get just from watching the movies.
Absolutely. I mean, it's one thing to see The Breakfast Club. It's another to understand the cultural earthquake these actors caused. Like, how did a few teen movies turn into this whole phenomenon?
I mean, talk about a legacy, right?
Yeah.
But it wasn't always smooth sailing
No, not at all.
for these actors. It's a story that actually starts with, well, kind of a slap in the
Oh,
face.
yeah. That New York Magazine article, 1985, David Blum drops this bombshell, and suddenly, bam.
It's Brat Pack, just like that.
And honestly, you gotta feel for those actors. Imagine you're Emilio Estevez, Molly Ringwald, Judd Nelson, all these rising stars, and suddenly,
You're lumped together under this label that, wasn't exactly a compliment.
oh, it was shady. I mean, the comparison to the Rat Pack was obvious, but it felt almost dismissive, you know? Like they had less talent, more attitude.
It was like their whole vibe was reduced to bratty.
Yeah.
And from what I've read, they were not happy about it.
No, they felt betrayed, I think. Like these were real friendships being twisted into a media narrative.
And to have that happen right when their careers are taking off.
Huge turning point. It makes you wonder, like, did that label actually box them in, you know?
No.
Affect the roles they got offered?
Almost a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, and that's where things get really interesting, right? Because you can't talk about the Brat Pack without talking about those iconic movies. The Breakfast Club, Pretty in Pink, St. Elmo's Fire. They weren't just fun, they were hitting on deep stuff.
Oh, they were deep.
Like social pressure, identity, that feeling of being lost in the world, things everyone goes through.
Take The Breakfast Club. 5 kids, stuck in detention. Sounds simple, right? But it went way beyond that. It was about being an outsider, breaking free from labels, and it did it with
Yeah.
this perfect mix of humor and heart.
Honestly, I bet anyone listening who's ever felt like they didn't belong, they felt seen by that movie.
Totally. St. Elmo's Fire.
Yeah.
It's all about that scary jump from college to, well, real life.
Ugh, yeah, now what? That question haunts everyone at some point.
Totally relatable, even decades later.
And let's not forget the style. Like, the Brat Pack didn't just make movies, they made trends. Big hair, leg warmers, those sweaters that are back in style now. I bet some of our listeners are rocking that look right now.
Oh, for sure. They were trendsetters, whether they wanted to be or not. They had this massive cultural impact,
Hmm.
from fashion to music to just how people saw youth culture.
They really did.
It's wild to think about. Just a handful of actors, and they end up defining a whole generation. But, I mean, they weren't all destined for the same level of fame, were they?
Right, and that's the other side of this, you know? That Brat Pack label, it's like it had a different effect on each of them. Some, like Rob Lowe, Demi Moore, they skyrocketed to A-list stardom.
But then others, like Judd Nelson, Ali Sheedy, their careers took a different path. Makes you think, did the label help, or did it hold some of them back?
Yeah, it really makes you think.
Because you can't deny, some of those early roles, they stuck with them.
Totally.
And then you have Andrew McCarthy. He actually made this documentary, Brats.
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
And get this, he sits down with David Blum, the journalist who started it all. They actually confront the impact of that article all these years later.
It's really something to see them face to face. You can feel the weight of those words, you know, how much that label still means to the actors and to the culture at large.
It's like they're finally having the conversation they couldn't back then.
Exactly. Processing it all.
And for anyone who wants to go even deeper, McCarthy also wrote a memoir, Brat, an 80s story, which is really insightful.
Oh, I gotta check that out. But before we get too deep into individual stories, I think it's worth zooming out a bit.
Yeah, good points.
The Brat Pack, they weren't the first group to get slapped with a label like that, and they definitely won't be the last. Like, the comparison to the Rat Pack is almost unavoidable. Two groups of actors, totally different times, but same kind of label.
It's funny how that happens.
It makes you wonder, what is it about certain groups that just captures the public imagination like that?
Is it the talent, the timing, the attitude?
Maybe it's a mix of everything, but both the Rat Pack and the Brat Pack, they left a mark, you know?
Yeah.
Their stories are still fascinating us decades later.
Absolutely. And for the Brat Pack, it's interesting because that label, it started out as a dig, but it almost became, well, a badge of honor.
It did. It became the symbol of a generation that wanted to be different, to shake things up.
And that's what's cool about revisiting their story now. It's not just nostalgia. It's about understanding how these young actors, with all their flaws and complexities, became cultural icons. But it's also important to acknowledge that there was a darker side to fame for some of them.
Oh, absolutely.
We can't forget that.
Oh.
Substance abuse, the pressures of the spotlight, those were real struggles, and they went beyond just tabloid fodder.
Right. Real people dealing with real issues.
It's a good reminder that behind the glamorous image, there were human beings trying to navigate it all. But before we get into that too deeply, I think it's time to look at some individual journeys within the Brat Pack.
Yeah, let's break it down.
Because each of them has a unique story to tell, and it just adds another layer to this whole fascinating phenomenon.
Can't wait. It's like they each took a different path, through this crazy world of fame.
Really is like navigating a forest, isn't it? Some find the clear path, others not so much. And they were so different as individuals, too.
Oh, totally. I mean, take Rob Lowe. Charisma for days, right?
Oh, yeah. Total movie star look.
Could have easily been stuck in that pretty boy role forever, but
Yeah.
he managed to evolve. Took on those more complex characters, built a real career.
He did. And Demi Moore, too. She started in those teen movies right alongside everyone else, but then Ghost, A Few Good Men, she went for those tough, gritty roles.
Pushed those boundaries, showed everyone she wasn't just a teen idol, and let's be real, she became this powerhouse for women in Hollywood.
Oh, for sure. Challenging those gender stereotypes, fighting for equal pay. I mean, that's inspiring.
Totally. It shows they weren't just like products of their time. They were shaping the culture.
Yeah, they were using their voices.
And then you have someone like Jed Nelson. I feel like he really struggled with that Brat Pack label.
I've read interviews where he talks about that, how it typecasts him.
Yeah, like it was hard to break free from those early roles. And I get it. If you're an artist, you want to grow, to stretch.
But that label, it's almost like it became this barrier.
Totally. Like preventing people from seeing beyond those teen movie characters.
It's like that saying, the nail that sticks out gets hammered down. And the Brat Pack, in a way, they were those nails.
Yeah.
Sticking out, challenging things. Some bent, some broke,
That's such a good analogy. And it makes you think about the price of fame, doesn't it? Not always a happy ending.
No, definitely not. Which is why I think Andrew McCarthy's documentary, Brats, is so powerful. It really digs into those difficult parts, lets these actors reflect on everything, the good and the bad.
And it shows how much perspective matters, right? Because that Brat Pack label, it meant different things to different people. For some, it was this badge of honor, rebellious youth, all that. But for others...
A burden they couldn't shake.
Exactly. It's fascinating how one little term can be so loaded. And it reminds us there's always more to the story than what we see on the surface.
Always. It's like we're these cultural archaeologists or something, digging through layers, trying to put the pieces together.
I love that.
And it's not just about a group of actors. It's about us, too. Our own anxieties, our hopes, that feeling of wanting to belong.
Oh, for sure. And it makes you wonder, are we all part of some kind of pack, in a way?
I like that. Maybe not literally, but those shared experiences, those moments that connect us across generations, yeah, maybe.
Totally. I mean, even if you weren't a teen in the 80s, even if you haven't seen every Brat Pack movie, there's something about their story that pulls you in.
Absolutely. That feeling of youth, wanting to fit in, but also wanting to be your own person. It's timeless.
Totally timeless. And that's why they're still so fascinating, right? It's more than just nostalgia. It's about understanding who we are, where we've been.
Love that. And it leads us to that big question of legacy. How will the Brat Pack be remembered? What's their impact all these years later?
Ooh, that's a tough one. But I think it's going to be multifaceted, The movies, the fashion, those conversations they started.
And their personal journeys, too. Those choices, those challenges, how they each handled it all. It's a very human story.
Very human. And that's worth celebrating, don't you think? Even with all the ups and downs, that human spirit shines through.
Totally agree. And speaking of human stories, there's one more thing we have to address. It wouldn't be a true deep dive if we didn't talk about some of the, controversies.
Yeah, that's fair. It's part of the story, for better or worse.
And it helps us understand the whole picture.
Right, exactly.
So I think we have to talk about the Rob Lowe scandal. Late 80s, huge media frenzy. It definitely cast a shadow, not just on him, but on the whole Brat Pack idea.
It did. It kind of fed into that whole narrative of, not just rebellious kids, but reckless behavior.
It probably made it harder for some of them to break free from that brat image.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's like it just confirmed what people were already saying. And it also shows you, the dark side of that fame, the constant attention, the pressure. It's a lot to deal with.
Especially when you're young.
Totally. And we should mention these substance abuse issues that some of them faced. I mean, it was a big problem in the 80s, period. But for people in the spotlight, it becomes this whole other thing.
It does, and it's a reminder that, fame doesn't make you immune to anything.
It doesn't. And behind those headlines, those were real people struggling.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the things Andrew McCarthy's documentary does well. It doesn't shy away from that stuff.
No, it doesn't sugarcoat it. It shows both sides, the highs and the lows.
Which I appreciate. It's a more honest way to look at it all.
Definitely. Reminds us that, these were real people, not just characters on a screen.
Exactly. Complex people.
With their own stories.
And I think that's a lesson for all of us, right? To look past the labels, to see each other as human beings.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So as we're wrapping up here, what are some of the key takeaways you hope people are walking away with?
Well, I hope they have a better understanding of what the Brat Pack was, that it was more than just a few actors or movies. It was this moment in time.
It was, and it captured a lot of what that generation was feeling, the good and the bad.
Totally. And I hope they see the complexities of fame. It's not all glitz and glamour.
Nope, not at all.
And most importantly, I hope they remember that behind every story, every label, there are real people.
With their own struggles and triumphs. Well said.
So, for anyone who wants to dive deeper, I can't recommend Andrew McCarthy's documentary enough.
Brats, right?
Yeah, Bratz. It's really well done.
And hey, if anyone out there wants to explore other pop culture moments, you know where to find us. We're always up for a deep dive.
That's right. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the Brat Pack. Until next time.